Do not underestimate them, Rockle intoned, his voice low but forceful. His words seemed to hang in the cold, electric air, but his audience was less than receptive. General Karatok's sharp features twisted in a mocking smirk as he leaned back, his arms crossed in defiance. Behind him, Tekrath, the young scout with a nervous twitch, avoided Rockle's gaze. They're mere animals. Bipedal mammals with inflated egos, Karatok scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. Their war machines are primitive, their biology weak, their tactics laughable. Rockle's lip curled, exposing a row of jagged, white teeth. I fought them in the first skirmishes on Valis. I know what they are capable of. The humans may seem primitive to you, but they are predators, bred from a world of harsh conditions and unforgiving laws of survival. And they are adaptable in ways you have not imagined. He leaned forward, pressing his hands against the edge of the table, his gaze boring into Karatok. The humans live to hunt, General. You cannot read them, as you would the other creatures we've conquered. Their minds work differently. They are not prey. They are the apex predators of their world. Karatok rolled his eyes. Are you trying to frighten us, Commander? This fear-mongering does not befit a warrior of your reputation. The younger officer's tone was laced with contempt, yet his posture stiffened just slightly. Rockle's patience wore thin. He tapped the control on the table, and the holographic display zoomed in, showing a human soldier and his canine companion, a fierce-looking creature with an alert posture and an unnatural intelligence in its gaze. These are not just tools to them, Rockle continued. The humans fight alongside other hunters, canines they call them. These creatures are as much part of their army as any of their warriors. They can smell us, track us, anticipate our movements. If you underestimate the humans, underestimate these animals, you won't just lose. You'll be hunted. Karatok sneered. So now, we are to fear their pets as well. He shook his head, laughing bitterly. You're starting to sound like a fool, Rockle. The commander's eye narrowed, memories of the bloodshed on Valis flashing through his mind. Whole squads ambushed in the dead of night, his own soldiers cut down by silent human shadows and relentless canines. Call it foolish if you want, Rockle snapped, his voice sharp as metal. I lost an entire platoon in one encounter, outmaneuvered, outgunned, outwitted. And not by their technology, but by their instincts. Humans are more than warriors. They are strategists, born killers. And these animals, their dogs, are extensions of themselves. They feel no fear, only loyalty to their pack. Tekrath fidgeted, his gaze flickering between the hologram and the hardened face of his commander. His nervousness did not go unnoticed. Commander, I've read the reports, he offered timidly. Surely they can't be as formidable as you say. They are only mortal. After all, Rockle's face hardened. Mortal, yes. But their resilience, their persistence, it defies logic. They fight as though each battle is personal, as though defeat is unacceptable. And they don't come alone. With those canines at their side, they become something far more dangerous than you can imagine. Karatok slammed his fist on the table, the hologram flickering in response. Enough. I am not here to listen to tales meant to scare hatchlings. We are the Zilfari. We do not cower from mindless beasts and their pets. Rockle looked at him for a long moment, his gaze as cold as the steel around him. He had given his warning. He had done his duty. Whether Karatok heeded it or not was no longer his concern. Very well, General, he said, his voice a resigned growl. But when you're out there, face to face with a human, remember what I told you. Remember that these creatures live to hunt, and once they see you as prey, they will not stop. He pressed another control, the image of the human and dog flickering out. Karatok smirked, pushing himself off the table and nodding to Tekrath. Come, Scout. Let's prepare to bring back trophies. If Rockle is too frightened to lead the assault, we will show him how warriors truly fight. As the two left, Rockle stood silently in the empty war room, his gaze fixed on the darkened screen. He knew what was coming. could almost smell the blood and feel the cold silence of failure that would follow. The humans would prove him right, and when they did, his people would pay dearly for their arrogance. But for now, he could do nothing but wait. The silence settled around him, heavy with the weight of truths unheeded, and the flickering lights of the war room cast his scarred face into the shadows. The forest was silent except for the quiet crunch of boots on damp earth. Captain Micah Bell led his patrol through the thick undergrowth, his gaze sharp, scanning the dense alien landscape with practiced focus. Beside him, Lieutenant Alex Gray moved soundlessly, his rifle at the ready. Behind him, Sergeant Jake Reese held tightly to Shadow's leash, the canine's muscular form taut with alertness, his nose low, picking up faint scents in the air. Shadow paused, ears pricking up as he caught an unfamiliar scent. His black coat bristled, muscles rippling under the dim forest light, and his tail went rigid, a signal they'd all learned to trust without question. Reese, accustomed to reading Shadow's signals, raised a closed fist, bringing the patrol to an immediate halt. Bell crouched down beside Reese, his voice low. "What's he got?" Reese squinted into the distance, following Shadow's pointed stare. "Something's close. Could be a trap. Could be a scout. Could be both," Gray muttered, his grip tightening on his rifle. "If they're Zilfari, they're not here for a stroll." Bell nodded, considering their options. The Zilfari, the dominant species on this hostile planet, were unlike any adversary they'd faced before, cold-blooded, calculating, and fiercely territorial. But after the reports of human forces gaining ground, they had grown bolder, engaging more frequently in brutal skirmishes. Bell's mission was to assess the enemy's movements, but he had a sinking feeling they were about to experience more than just observation. "Keep tight formation," Bell murmured. "If Shadow senses anything, trust him." The team adjusted their positions, closing ranks, their breaths controlled, almost silent. They moved forward slowly, every rustle of leaves and snap of branches heightening their focus. Shadow took the lead, his nose twitching, his entire being alert as he navigated through the underbrush with the precision of a trained hunter. A low hum suddenly filled the air, faint at first, then steadily growing louder. Shadow's head snapped up, a growl rumbling deep in his throat. Reese's knuckles went white on his rifle. "They're here," he hissed. Before Bell could give a command, a flash of green energy sliced through the trees, narrowly missing Gray, who dove to the ground. In an instant, the silence erupted into chaos. Zilfari soldiers burst from the shadows, their sleek, armor-clad forms nearly blending with the foliage. They moved with a fluid grace, weapons glowing with deadly light, and their eyes gleamed with cold malice. Bell raised his rifle, his expression grim but controlled. "Engage," he ordered, his voice cutting through the clamor. Gunfire erupted, blending with the sharp, alien whine of energy weapons. Shadow darted forward, staying close to the ground, moving swiftly from cover to cover. His keen senses tracked every flicker of movement, every faint scent of the enemy. A Zilfari scout attempted to flank Gray, but Shadow saw him first. With a growl that echoed through the forest, he lunged, his powerful jaws clamping down on the scout's arm. The alien soldier let out a guttural shriek, struggling to shake the dog off, but Shadow held firm, his teeth piercing through the Zilfari's armor. "Good boy, Shadow," Reese called, providing cover fire as another alien soldier appeared, aiming at the dog. Gray, seeing the threat, fired a precise shot that dropped the attacker before he could release his weapon. Shadow released his grip, bounding back to Reese's side as the patrol pressed their advantage. The Zilfari regrouped, their movements more frantic, and Bell could see the surprise flickering across their cold faces. They hadn't expected humans to counter so swiftly, nor had they anticipated the efficiency of Shadow's presence. He watched as the aliens faltered, their rhythm disrupted, and he knew they were beginning to understand Rocco's warnings. One of the Zilfari soldiers barked an order in their guttural language, signaling a retreat. But before they could pull back fully, Bell's team had them surrounded. Every move was executed with precision, each soldier trusting the other's positions, their instincts honed from countless hours of training. And Shadow was at the heart of it all, his senses amplifying their awareness, his presence a silent reassurance as they closed in. Within moments, the forest returned to silence, broken only by the heavy breaths of the humans and the soft panting of Shadow, who stood beside Reese, his head held high, his eyes scanning for any remaining threats. The Zilfari lay defeated, a few managing to slip away, but Bell knew they had made their point. Gray knelt by one of the fallen Zilfari, examining the alien's weapon. "They're getting more aggressive," he noted, frowning. "And desperate." Bell nodded, wiping the sweat from his brow. "Desperate means sloppy. But don't let your guard down. We're still deep in their territory, and they're not done with us yet." Reese knelt down, rubbing Shadow's head, murmuring words of praise. Shadow licked his hand, his tail giving a quick wag before he returned to full alertness, his gaze scanning the forest as if daring anything to approach. As the team regrouped, Bell couldn't help but feel a grim satisfaction. The Zilfari were fierce, but they were unfamiliar with the true depth of human determination. And with the loyalty of allies like Shadow, they had something even the Zilfari couldn't replicate. A seamless bond of trust between species, built through loyalty and survival. "Let's move," Bell said, gesturing for the patrol to continue deeper into the forest. He could feel the weight of the encounter pressing on his team, but the taste of victory was a reminder of what they were fighting for. This was only the beginning, and as they pressed forward, he knew the Zilfari were beginning to realize what it meant to face a human patrol, especially one that didn't fight alone. The team moved on, silent once more, the scent of alien blood lingering in the air, with Shadow leading the way. The ruins loomed over the forest like a jagged skeleton, its shattered walls and twisted metal remnants scattered across the ground. Rocco crouched behind a broken column, his gaze fixed on the humans' approach. Shadows flickered across the rubble, moving in disciplined formation. Rocco's experienced eye noted how they advanced, cautious, calculating, each step a testament to years of training. These were not impulsive attackers but hunters, as he had warned. Beside him, General Karatok fidgeted, his fingers tightening around his plasma rifle. His usual arrogance was gone, replaced with a flicker of unease that only Rocco could recognize. Rocco suppressed a grim satisfaction. It had taken less than a single engagement to strip Karatok of his overconfidence, but now they were too deep in the enemy's path to avoid consequences. "They're just humans," Karatok muttered, almost as if reassuring himself. "Our weapons will make short work of them." Rocco's jaw clenched. He had seen enough to know the humans were unlike any other enemy the Zilfari had faced. And their canines, their army dogs, were an extension of that menace, unerringly alert to every hidden soldier, every concealed trap. "Prepare your squad to hold position here," Rocco commanded, his voice a low growl. "If they breach our line, we're finished." Karatok hesitated, casting a doubtful glance at the incoming patrol. Shadow sleeked, black form darted in and out of the ruins, his senses on high alert, sniffing out cover points and potential threats. Rocco could see the dog's intelligence in every precise movement. He guided his human companions with a quiet authority, urging them to remain unseen and avoid the alien soldiers' lines of fire. Just as Rocco predicted, the human patrol split into two groups, advancing from different directions to surround the alien forces. Karatok's troops, less adaptable than their enemies, failed to readjust in time. Their formation was thrown off, forced into chaotic retreat positions under relentless fire. "Hold the line!" Karatok shouted, frustration breaking through his voice as he watched his soldiers stumble back, disoriented. His earlier bravado was gone, replaced by an edge of desperation. Bell, on the other side of the ruins, signaled his men with swift hand gestures. Gray took position by his side, rifle steady, while Reese, with Shadow at his heel, prepared to move forward. Bell's gaze swept over the battlefield, reading the situation in an instant. The aliens had been forced into tight clusters, creating the perfect opportunity for the patrol to strike with precision. "Shadow, find them," Reese whispered, releasing the leash. Shadow darted forward like an arrow, moving low to the ground, his dark form blending seamlessly into the shadows. Rocco watched with a mixture of awe and dread as the dog closed in, each movement precise and purposeful, unerring in his target. An alien scout, hidden behind a wall fragment, raised his weapon to fire at the advancing humans, but Shadow was faster. The dog lunged, his jaws clamping onto the scout's arm with bone-crushing force. The alien let out a strangled scream, staggering backward, and before he could react further, Reese's shot struck him down. Rocco's heart pounded, a strange feeling surging within him. The humans moved as a single unit, a perfect blend of instinct and training. Each action flowed into the next with brutal efficiency, leaving the Zilfari soldiers scrambling to keep pace. Every time an alien attempted to break free or reposition, Shadow was there, predicting their moves with an uncanny precision. Rocco could see the terror building in his troops' eyes, the realization settling in that they were not simply outmatched. They were being hunted. Karatok, seeing his forces faltering, finally turned to Rocco, panic breaking through his once confident facade. What do we do?" he stammered, gripping his weapon tightly. "They're surrounding us." Rocco's expression was hard, his voice a low growl. "You fight as I told you. Fall back. Keep your formation tight, and don't let them separate us further." But even as he spoke, he knew their efforts would likely be in vain. The humans' tactics were too precise, their movements too synchronized, and with that dog by their side, they were a step ahead at every turn. With a nod to his remaining squad, Rocco issued a quiet command to retreat, hoping to salvage what was left of his forces. But the humans pressed forward, their rifles steady, their pace unrelenting. As they closed in, Gray fired a shot that grazed Karatok's shoulder, sending the general stumbling back. Bell's gaze was cold and unyielding as he advanced, his every step a reminder of human resilience, the unforgiving nature Rocco had come to respect. In a final act of desperation, Karatok raised his weapon toward Bell, but Shadow leapt forward, knocking the weapon from his hands. Karatok staggered, eyes wide with disbelief as he found himself unarmed, cornered by a creature he had dismissed as a mere animal. "Yield," Bell said, his voice calm but laced with warning. He motioned to Shadow, who growled softly, eyes fixed on Karatok as if daring him to make a move. Karatok hesitated, his gaze flickering between Bell's unyielding stare and Shadow's unblinking focus. He slowly lowered his hands, understanding now, too late, the gravity of his mistake. Rocco watched in silence, his chest heavy with a mix of anger and reluctant admiration. In the face of human resolve, the Zilfari had proven no match. Rocco knew that Karatok's failure was not just a tactical error. It was the consequence of a fatal arrogance that the humans had exploited with ruthless efficiency. As the humans regrouped, Rocco felt a grim certainty settle over him. The humans were not merely fighters. They were a force of nature, a collective predator born to hunt. He had warned them, and now they were learning the cost of disregarding that warning. As Shadow trotted back to his handler, the ruins fell silent once more. But Rocco knew this was only the beginning. Bell's gaze met his for a brief moment, a silent acknowledgement of the battle's outcome, and of the respect between adversaries who understood what it meant to survive. Rocco stood alone atop the ridge, overlooking the broken battlefield below. His few remaining troops clustered behind him, their eyes hollow with exhaustion and dread. The humans were advancing again, a shadowed line moving silently through the dense trees, every movement a testament to the unyielding determination Rocco had warned of. In this final moment, there would be no retreat, no reinforcements, only a choice between surrender and annihilation. "Commander, what do we do?" Tekratha's voice was barely a whisper, his fear palpable as he looked to Rocco for a glimmer of hope. Rocco stared ahead, his single remaining eye sharp with an intensity that defied the despair around him. "We stand," he replied quietly, his voice resolute. There was no room left for false assurances or bravado. The humans were coming, and he knew that facing them would require more than just strength. It would demand sacrifice. In the distance, he caught sight of Captain Bell leading his squad, flanked by Lieutenant Gray and Sergeant Reese. And just ahead of them, moving with a practiced caution that underscored his importance, was Shadow. The dog's head was low, his nose scanning the air, his movements deliberate and unyielding. In Shadow, Rocco saw the embodiment of the human's essence: discipline, loyalty, and an unrelenting instinct for survival. Here was a creature who could read the battlefield like a map, who was an extension of human intent. "We will make our stand here," Rocco announced, his voice gaining strength as he spoke. "Whatever else happens, we face them as warriors." He turned to his soldiers, his gaze intense, as if willing them to adopt his conviction. "These humans, they are more than we understand. I have seen it myself. But if we are to fall, we fall fighting." A murmur of approval rose from the troops, though their eyes were wary. Tekrath adjusted his weapon, squaring his shoulders as he took his place at Rocco's side. For a brief moment, courage eclipsed the fear that had plagued them throughout this campaign. The humans approached with deadly precision, covering ground in tight formation, their faces set with a grim determination. Bell moved as if each step brought him closer to an inevitable victory, his gaze unwavering as he assessed the Zilfari defenses. Rocco could feel the weight of that gaze. It was the look of a leader who would not accept surrender, who knew no other path than forward. Then came the first exchange, a volley of plasma fire erupting from the Zilfari line. Bell and his men dispersed, slipping into cover as they returned fire, their movements seamless and practiced. Rocco's troops responded with disciplined shots, but every opening they left was swiftly exploited. As the humans closed in, it was clear they were not here merely to end the fight. They were here to finish it with finality. Shadow led the charge, weaving through the underbrush with deadly purpose. The dog's focus was unbroken, his eyes fixed on Rocco's position, as if sensing the true threat. Rocco felt a pang of reluctant admiration for the animal, recognizing the intelligence and bravery in its every move. The humans had made him into more than a weapon. Shadow was a warrior in his own right. "Take cover," Rocco barked, shoving Tekrath behind a broken column, just as a bullet struck the ground near his feet. The gunfire was closing in, but Rocco stood his ground, his weapon raised, his focus locked on Bell's advancing squad. He fired a shot that struck near Gray's position, forcing the lieutenant back, but even that minor success was fleeting. The humans pressed forward undeterred, their movements swift and relentless. Then, in a daring move, Bell emerged from cover, his rifle raised, his gaze locked on Rocco. The two leaders stared across the battlefield, a silent understanding passing between them, a respect that neither needed words to convey. Rocco realized in that moment that Bell was not here out of malice or conquest. He was here because he understood the meaning of survival, of fighting for something larger than himself. In that instant, Rocco knew what he must do. He turned to Tekrath and the remaining troops, his voice soft yet unbreakable. "Fall back. This is my fight now. Tell the others what you have seen. Tell them to respect the humans." Tekrath hesitated, his face a mask of disbelief. "Commander, no. We can still." "Go," Rocco commanded, his tone brooking no argument. "You have your orders." With one final, reluctant glance, Tekrath led the others away, slipping into the shadows and leaving Rocco alone on the ridge. Bell watched as the young scout retreated, his focus then returning to Rocco, an acknowledgement in his eyes that this would be the end. Shadow moved closer, his intense gaze fixed on Rocco, who felt a strange sense of peace settle over him. Here, in this final moment, was a creature who understood the balance of life and death, of loyalty and survival. Rocco slowly lowered his weapon, a silent gesture of respect to his adversaries. Bell, recognizing the gesture, signaled for his men to hold fire. The battlefield grew silent as the humans watched Rocco, uncertain but respectful. Bell lowered his own weapon, his expression solemn as he regarded the Zilfari commander who had fought so fiercely. Rocco met Bell's gaze one last time, his voice a quiet echo across the clearing. "We are not so different, human," he said, the words a final acknowledgement of the truth he had come to understand. "You fight as I would. If I were one of you—" Bell nodded, his response simple but sincere. "And you fought well, Rocco. We'll remember." With that, Rocco turned away, disappearing into the shadows as the humans lowered their weapons, allowing him this final act of dignity. As the night settled over the battlefield, a strange sense of peace filled the air, a silence born not of victory or defeat, but of understanding. Bell and his squad stood quietly, watching the empty ridge where Rocco had made his final stand, their faces solemn. Shadow sat by Bell's side, his eyes reflecting a deep intelligence, a sense that even he understood the significance of this moment. In that silence, they recognized that this battle had ended not just with the strength of arms, but with a bond of respect between two species that, for all their differences, had proven themselves to be kindred in the harshest way possible, as survivors, as warriors, and as predators in a universe that demanded both.